This is an inventor tutorial for assembling the puzzle cube into an assembly file. Alright, so here in front of us we have a completed puzzle cube. So you can see we have 5 parts: orange, yellow, brown, a blue piece, and another piece that's more like purple. To guide us, it's going to be helpful to have a paper design just of how everything goes together. Okay, so I have my exploded view of the puzzle cube here, and I'm going to go ahead and start a new assembly file. Alright, I want to make sure I'm selecting standard, and since I am in the English template, I get IN for inches in parentheses. Alright, I do have my project file set to the appropriate project, so I've made all my parts in this project file called PuzzleCube3. Okay, so again, in general, we're going to move left to right. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to place a part. Okay, because I'm in my project file, it's going to just pull in those 5 parts. You can see I already have that assembly that I showed you at the beginning there, but I want to demonstrate how I made that. Okay, so in general, I think it's most helpful to bring in the key central part. All right, so in this case, I'm going to say this blue part back here. All right, it's got 2 pieces up top, 2 pieces on the middle layer, 2 pieces on the bottom. It's kind of central. To me, it's the most important part, but there's really a lot of equity among all these parts. So really, as long as you bring any one part in, you'll be fine. All right, so I'm just going to click to place it. Now it's going to give me the option to place another one. I only have one of these parts, so I'm going to hit escape. And that's the only part I need. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to get this to look like the way I have it set up here. So I'm going to slightly change my view here. Just rotate that around that way. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is bring in a second part. I find it works best if you bring one part in at a time rather than bring all 5 in. So bring a part in, lock it into place, and then go from there. So I'm going to do this orange part next. All right, you can see that orange part is going to interlock with the blue through here. Okay, so I go back to place. So again, I place one, all right, and then I don't need to place any others. All right, and so it's really helpful to sort of imagine how this part is going to go. One piece of advice I would have is do not try to, I can click and drag this piece. Don't try to click and drag it into place. All right, I find it's easier if it's just off to the side. All right, but it is going to be helpful if I kind of rotate this around so I can make it a little bit easier to understand how that goes. So again, moving left to right, there is this free rotate. All right, if I click on that, all right, and I click on the part, or in this case, it's already selected that part, I can kind of rotate how that looks. And I don't need it to be perfect, all right, but that's essentially, it's a little difficult to do, but it's going to go somewhere over there. All right, but really the way I'm going to do that is through the constrain tool. Okay, and because we're dealing strictly with linear parts here, the only type we're going to need, it's a type mate, and then there's 2 different solutions. There's the mate and there's the flush. And you can see the picture there that sort of demonstrates what each one is. So if I'm going to do mates and flushes between the surfaces, I'm going to have to do 3 total. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mate this surface right here, and then I'm going to rotate my view so I can see it. That should be in contact with this surface over here. Okay, I'm going to apply that to lock it into place, and I just want to show you what that looks like. All right, so it might be most helpful if we look at it from the top. All right, so now these 2 are mated along that surface there. So as I move it, all right, they're always going to be together. Alright, but right now you can see it slides back and forth. So to prevent that, right, we know these back levels should be in line. So I'm going to flush the two back levels. Alright, so right now I can move the orange one up and down. So one way I could stop that is I know the top parts should also be flush. Okay, so I just did 3 constraints. If I come over to my browser bar and I open up the orange part, I can see those 3 constraints. I can go back and edit them, or I could delete them if I did something wrong. All right, but with those 3, now when I move the orange piece, the blue piece moves with it. They are completely constrained to each other. They are now, partners, so to speak. Okay, let's go back to our exploded view. Let's do this yellow part next. Okay, so it's like an upside down T. That's going to go right next to the orange part with the 3 down on the bottom layer. So we're going to place okay, so I'm going to constrain, I'm going to do flush here, and the top of this should be in line with the top of the orange. Alright, it doesn't appear to have moved it at all, but if I look at the front view, alright, I cannot change essentially its height. It's in line. Okay. I also know that you can see it right here. The edge of the yellow cube should be flush with the end of the blue cube. So I'm going to flush this to this. Alright, and then I'll do a mate. This surface here should be mated with that one there. Alright, so they are together now too. Alright, so let's bring in the brown part that's going to go on top here. Okay, and I'm going to constrain this one a little bit differently. So we've been constraining surfaces. I'm going to constrain this one by edges. And so I can mate the edges. Okay, so let me see if I can rotate this, kind of demonstrate. Okay, so that gives us a better sense. This one's going to sort of slide on top here. So essentially I want this edge right here that's highlighted. I want that to be aligned with this one. In other words, I want them mated. And I want this edge right here in line with that edge. Okay, and actually when I do that, if I mate the edges, alright, I only have to do 2 constraints to get that locked in place. Alright, so a slightly different way of doing things. Instead of constraining surfaces, you can constrain edges. So we'll do that again for the last part, which is my green part. Let me rotate that around like that. Okay, so we're going to constrain by edges again. So this edge right here should be in contact with that edge. And you can see with that there, it actually just kind of rotates around that. And then the last one I want, this edge is going to constrain to that. Okay, so there's my completed puzzle cube. Now the last thing I want to do is, I'm not a fan of it, I can drag it around space. I do want to lock it into place. And this is something we could have done at the beginning, but it's more challenging. The other constraint is a little bit more abstract, so I want to save it till the end. And what I'm going to do is just constrain the cube, all right, to the origin. So we have these planes here, all right, that make up our three-dimensional space. So I'm going to try to constrain them, the entire cube, okay, within that plane. So like, let's start with, say, the XZ plane. All right, you can see that kind of aligns with the top. So I'm going to constrain, and I'm going to do a mate between the XZ plane and the top surface here. Okay, and that completely screwed up our puzzle cube. So instead of a mate, I'm just going to switch it to flush. And that still doesn't look good. All right, so let's cancel that for now. Let's try constraining one of the other ones. How about the YZ plane? Let's constrain that to the front here. All right, that looks a little bit better. Okay, so that aligned, and let's see what that looks like. So if we do a front view, I can still move the cube, but I can't move it left and right. Okay, so that was the YZ plane. All right, let's try the XY plane. You can see that kind of aligns with the side there. So I'll do a mate. All right, and again, that kind of really screwed things up. So I switch it over to flush, and flush seems to work a lot better, so we'll do flush instead. All right, so now all that's left is that top part. So I'm going to try to do that one more time. Constrain between the XZ plane and the top. All right, you can see in a mate, it's really goofy. In a flush, looks a lot better. All right, and now my puzzle cube is locked. I can't move it anywhere. Okay, so I'll do a quick save. All right, I already have one puzzle cube assembly, so I'm going to call it Puzzle Cube Assembly 2. And that's it.